is Omar Salgado, and you're listening to Seriously Loco.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and tonight I'm joined by Mikka Burrell. Mikka, how's it going?
It's going well, Phil. Thank you.
And we're also joined by Christian Canales. Christian, always a pleasure.
Happy to be back. Sorry I had to miss the last one. It was a good one.
It's all good. It's we can give you a little time here at the end maybe to work your way through.
Honestly, I think it's okay. I've put it behind me now.
Okay. All right.
You got closure?
Yeah, I don't need to bring up those emotions anymore.
Yeah, it's probably for the best, just to leave it in the rear view. So we're here. We've got a lot to talk about today. Primarily, we've got locomotive-friendly results to talk about, and then a couple of roster things and some other developments out in the Twitter sphere for Locomotive fans and Locomotive's squad. But in the meantime, since we're still talking about Locomotive's preseason, competitive football being played around the world, both in Europe and then in Mexico as well. This past week and really last weekend, Mikka, crazy viewing in European football.
Oh my goodness, there were so many good matches in Europe in the top 5 leagues. Phil, your club have already wrapped up the Premier League title, so I don't even bother to watch the Premier League.
This is me loudly knocking on wood.
I really don't even bother to watch the Premier League if something else is on, because there are full-on title races in Italy and in Germany as well. So some really good viewing. Also, La Liga has been pretty interesting as well. First good match I watched was the Basque Derby between Real Sociedad and Athletic Bilbao. Real Sociedad, they're just one of those teams that are just fun for a neutral to watch. They're very young. They play really exciting football, nice kits.
Right.
And they beat their rivals 2-1. I know we say we've got the Dutch Zlatan on deck, but Real Sociedad have the actual new Zlatan in Alexander Isak. That kid is incredible. He scored in that match, and he's just, I believe he was a Dortmund.
He was,
property
for a little bit.
And then,
young Swedish striker.
Yes.
And big imposing presence like Zlatan, but
exactly.
Technically gifted as well.
Exactly. He scores with his feet. So that was a good match.
Yeah.
Then you caught some of the Bundesliga matches too, right?
Yeah. I have a soft spot for German football, and although the club that I support in Germany, Dynamo Dresden, is still toiling in the lower portions of the second division, propping up the table at the moment in the second division, but watching towards the top of the Bundesliga this season has been so entertaining because, normally, although Bayern are top again, despite the fact that it seemed like they weren't going to be this season, all of the teams around them are competitive and are either pushing them in the title race or in the case of Leverkusen Dortmund, you have two teams who are really trying to maintain those Champions League places. And so Leverkusen hosted Dortmund, and it seemed like it would be a good game because, Leverkusen are kind of that team that you're still waiting for a few of the players in the squad to hit their full potential. Mm-hmm. Dortmund are loaded to the absolute brim with talent, but haven't really gelled as well as a squad, and it produced an absolute classic 4-3. Dortmund led twice. Leverkusen opened the scoring and then scored 2 goals in 2 minutes in the final 10 to snatch a victory right at the death. And the captain scored the winner as well, Lars Bender. One of those glancing headers into the far post. It's just a classic match, and one that, combined with the atmosphere that's so prevalent in Germany too, it's just like makes for amazing viewing. And then Italy had a great game as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah, like I said, another title race. I mean, we all know Juventus are trying to go through their 10th Scudetto?
Yeah.
Something like that in a row. But I mean, they've got serious competition this season in Inter, Antonio Conte's Inter, and of course Lazio as well. The Derby della Madonnina was amazing. I mean, of course, we know that Zlatan finally left, LA Galaxy and returned to AC Milan, his home, I guess you could say. He scored and assisted the first two, and I was thinking, okay, there's no way that this is happening right now. I fully expected Inter to run away with it. Yeah. And they did, eventually scoring 4 unanswered goals, and it was just an incredible match. I mean, Inter have basically overhauled the entire squad. They've had so many signings come in. They're fully backing Antonio Conte, and right now they're sitting top of the table. And this weekend they play Lazio. Right. So Italy is extremely interesting as well. I really encourage everyone, if your Premier League team is nowhere near the top, which most likely it's not because of the lead that Liverpool have built up, see around Europe and watch some of these matches, because it's been incredible. And
I mean, in the case of Italy now with ESPN Plus, which you likely, if you listen to this, you likely have a subscription, then you can watch matches from Serie A, and then starting next season, you'll be able to watch Bundesliga and second Bundesliga matches on ESPN Plus. So more and more football coming to the platform. But right across the border, Christian, in Juarez, we have a team on the rise.
Yeah, definitely. It's weird. I can't even really put my finger on what's happened. The Bravos are in third place right now, sitting on 3 league wins, a loss, and a tie. And they've scored 12 goals in those 5 games this season, compared to the 17 they scored in total last season, which is the reason why that's strange to me is because they didn't add too many attacking pieces. Where they were really leaking from was the defense, and they added that, but you didn't expect to see the goal scoring, and I think that maybe just them acclimating themselves to that top flight kind of pace and skill that they were facing, and it's been an entertaining season. I'm
having trouble fully grasping Bravos being good in the Clausura, because while they were in the Ascenso, it seemed like they always had a great Apertura, followed by just absolutely shitting the bed in the second half. And this time they're flipping the script on that.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think that it's a different team overall than it was in Ascenso. They kind of had to switch things around and obviously find some more quality. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say. That they've definitely turned it around, and they've made, like we saw, a couple of new big front office signings. And I'm looking forward to seeing what that does, because, I assume that they're paying... I already forgot his last name.
Memo.
I just remember the first name. I assume they're paying him a whole lot of money, so the expectations are probably high. And from what I've read about it and from what I know about him, I expect that he'll deliver. So it's a team to look out for, and I think in the next couple of years, they'll be in that. When you think of the top 4 or 5 Mexican teams, that they'll be in that conversation.
That is, promising signs all around Bravos, as they sit third in the table at the moment. Definitely a great start to the second half, and we'll see how they're able to finish things up. Potentially a playoff berth.
Yeah, I don't think at this point it's too far fetched from what we've seen from them. They aren't winning games, against the run of form or at the last second. The games that they're winning, dominating, with the exception of maybe this last one was one of the closer games. But America 3-1, Monarcas 3-0. They're not fluke games,
right?
And they've just looked convincing, and they're shutting teams down offensively, and they're getting their goals. So,
well, speaking of, as we move into Locomotive's preseason, speaking of acclimating to a higher level of play and trying to come to grips with that, the first result that we had, we obviously in the last episode talked about the 7-0 win over Texas United. Immediately the team jumps up from facing an amateur team to facing an MLS side in FC Cincinnati out there in Tucson, and it's a 1-0 loss. But based on the reports around the game, I mean, it does seem like pretty much we were talking about two evenly matched sides, at least on preseason form.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I wasn't able to. I don't think anybody was able to watch it, but from what I could gather, from what I could glean from the reports on the game, was that it was close. I don't think anyone scored until the 82nd minute. So
and Drew Becky did put a ball in the back of the net in the 62nd, but marked off for offsides, which was a very delayed reaction because the goal was tweeted out, and then it was about maybe 15 minutes later that they said that there was no goal. So it was.
Did they bring VAR to the friendlies?
Yeah.
Yeah, so. I mean, yeah, no, we were able to hold them off until very late on, and I was able to read that Mario Slomis did put himself about and give the keeper some trouble. So that's good to see that our new signing is already kind of imposing himself on matches, even though it is preseason. But
yeah, I
mean, any chance you get to play higher opposition is a good one, and to lose 1-0 is really not a big deal.
I mean, do you take any sort of credence or anything from this match? Especially given that, just a few days prior, Phoenix had lost 3-0 at the hands of Cincinnati. I mean, can you even compare at this point, or is it just you have to kind of take this result and be like, okay, like we didn't get thrashed and we seem like we hung in there, so like it's good conditioning and otherwise like good positive signs?
Yeah, I think that with preseason games, you can't really compare one to another, but across teams, and I think you do have to take it, like you said, at just as what it is, just an opportunity to get on the field and an opportunity for Mark to figure out what kind of lineups he might like, and an opportunity for players to get those full pitch runs and stuff, and just get into shape and kind of remember what it's like to be playing competitively for 90 minutes or however long they're playing. So I think you just take it as an opportunity to learn and not really look for any sort of, I guess, bragging rights.
Yeah.
For what so yeah, just be happy with whatever happens as long as you're doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in a match like this too, Mikka, we have it's apparent as well that we know that Mark's approach to these type of tough games and stuff is always going to be focused on defending well and possessing the ball when possible. I mean, is it more just a reinforcement of, okay, like we've got the team 2 games into the preseason already kind of showing some of the qualities of what a Mark Lowry side is going to play like for most of the season? Yeah,
I think we had already kind of decided between us on the podcast that this is primarily a defensive team, a defensive-minded team. And with the new faces, 4 new faces that have come in at least at this point, it's good that you can kind of see from the scoreline and reading about the game, and for those who were able to watch it, that we're able to kind of have that continuity going into the second season and have people that are apparently learning the tactics pretty quickly. So, yeah, I'm encouraged by it. I mean, to just give up 1 goal against an MLS side, and I believe that's the first time we've ever played an MLS side.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a good sign.
The trip to Tucson is shortly followed by a trip back to El Paso, and within 48 hours, Locomotive's playing another game against San Antonio FC. San Antonio FC, little bit of in a strange kind of transition right now with Alan Marcina taking over as the head coach over there, and they've had kind of a reworking of their lineup. They have about 10 fully contracted players at the moment. They have a couple additions who didn't travel, who are still working out, I guess, contract stuff or whatever. They didn't travel for the friendly, but the turnaround here for Locomotive to play on a Wednesday and a Friday, I mean, for preseason, pretty brutal on a lot of these players, and especially playing in places like Tucson and El Paso, playing at elevation and all that stuff, coming off of these off-season workouts. Do you see the kind of quick turnaround as a benefit for the squad in the extra conditioning, or does that worry you at all, you know, in terms of having almost like fixture congestion in the preseason?
I mean, as long as everyone comes out of the game healthy, I think it's fine. I think it's important to get that conditioning in now, because I think that's harder to build up during the regular season, you know, when you have to do, you know, tactical training and stuff every week.
Sure.
So, like I said, as long as everyone comes out, you know, unharmed, then I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah, and I think being that it's our second season, we're kind of able to flesh the squad out a little bit more. I think we're going to learn a lot about Mark Lowry's approach to rotation this year.
Yeah.
Since we actually have depth.
Since we actually have like people to rotate.
Right.
I mean, one manager who's world class at rotation is Jurgen Klopp. Yeah. And we know that Mark is a big fan of his work, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of how he manages everyone's minutes. It's hard to kind of take any conclusions from preseason, but yeah, I think that'll be very interesting, an interesting storyline to watch out for.
One of the things, so I was lucky enough to be able to see this match, and one of the things that struck me about Mark's approach to it was, well, one, he didn't play. You know, you'll often see in friendlies kind of the rule of 45 or whatever when teams are on their preseason tours and all this stuff. You'll play with one team for a half, and then you'll make all like 11 substitutions at halftime, and the other team will play the next 45. Took a little bit different approach, and I think it may have been driven by the quick turnaround in fixtures, but he played the opening half hour with 1-11, made about 7 changes in the 30th minute to play the final 15 of the half, then started the second half with a different team, and then half an hour in made like 7 or 8 more changes to that team. So he basically played with 2 different 11s and then made changes half an hour in to each half. And it was interesting because of the way, I mean, there were certain players that got a lot more minutes than others. Memo and Chapa like featured very heavily across all 4 iterations of the squad. But one of the things I found really interesting was how he moved players between roles. And Fabrice Facobo started the game at center back and then played the second half of the game in midfield. So we also got to see kind of the versatility, and that's one of the things that I think when we look around the signings that Mark has made, he's purchased a lot of players and brought in a lot of players who can fill a lot of roles. So, I mean, that kind of contributes to the depth that we're feeling versus last year where we had more players, but not necessarily as much quality and to fulfill the different roles. We had certain players who, if they were out, we were just up Schitt's Creek.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be really interesting. I think that the new signings especially feel like they have so much versatility just in and of themselves. And so the way that Mark plans to use them, I'm really interested to see.
The interesting thing. So first half, the legs were showing. Like the fact that we looked exhausted, and San Antonio definitely seized on that in the first half. They started with their first team more or less, or most of their first team signings were out there, and you could tell that they were much fresher, and they pressed us very high, and that brings me to the one negative really that came out of that first half for me, and I think Mark touched on it a little bit, and it's something that crept in at times last season, is just forced passes into midfield, or cheap giveaways out of defense, trying to stick to our guns and play out from the back. There are times where we kind of play ourselves into trouble, and both goals come from that sort of situation. So I mean, seeing that little bit, just a little bit, I don't know, just gave me a little bit of flashbacks to certain moments of last season where I was like, oh no, it's happening, but I guess those defensive errors and stuff, is it almost better that we make some mistakes like that in a game where it literally doesn't matter?
Of course. I mean, you'd rather have it in the preseason than the regular season. You'd rather it not happen at all, honestly. Right. But, I mean, players are still human, and even if, that's not something that they're going to continue doing, you'd like to think that, their Mark is still trying to kind of break those habits, and, if I don't know exactly who made these mistakes. Obviously I didn't see the game, but if it's a new player, it's a little more forgivable.
The one was, and I hate to dime him out, but the first goal was just a poor rush pass by Logan out. He tried to play the ball into Richie, which, I mean, if you're picking a target, he's one of the first ones. I wouldn't blame anyone for trying to get him the ball. But he just had a San Antonio player all right on him, and it was one pass and a guy's 1-on-1, because it just totally caught us out. But it was so much of it. It's kind of tough to judge, because we were looking just completely shattered, from the first whistle, because they had played within 48 hours, a 4 hours drive from El Paso. So
yeah, well, we should probably also, to be fair to San Antonio, give them a little bit of credit, because it's my understanding that Ellen Marcina is very much a fan of the press.
Yes.
And so you describing what just happened there, it sounds like these players are trying to put his plan into motion quickly. And also, I mean, it's my understanding too that they brought along a lot of younger players who were probably trying to get noticed by the boss, and hopefully, be in contention for the regular season. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure San Antonio's tactics had something to do with that too.
Yeah, and the first goal for them, decent finish from Gonzalo Dorenzo, I believe, was the Argentinian forward. I feel like it's going to be a common theme with San Antonio FC this year, in that it's basically going to be, the Argentine, alternate national team, I guess, the American-based Argentine national team. So they just brought in Luis Solignac, who was playing at Chicago Fire recently. But yeah, they
saw the new uniform and had to get out of there.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah. So the first half, a little tough for Locomotive. It was definitely tough for them to kind of get back into the swing of things. San Antonio was putting them under loads of pressure. But there was some good that came out of the game, and the interesting news that came out of this one was we uncovered a little bit of a scoop, in that the scorer of Locomotive's first goal of the game, which I have to give credit to Brian. Brian made a ridiculous, like, one of those just scything runs down the right-hand side, cut the ball back, and after his cutback found Nick Ross, who was unlucky not to score, which is such a common sentence.
Man, poor Nick.
It was a good save by Cardoni.
He didn't hit the frame this time, at least.
No, yeah. Good save, but he pushed it right back out to player TBA. And we were able to uncover the fact that that player TBA is none other than Dylan Maras, who has been plying his trade for the Miami FC, ironically enough, over the past about 4 seasons. Goal scoring number 10, which something that we're in the market for. Just pending some final details, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, maybe like 5,000 times on our last pod, I was really wanting us to get more goals from midfield, and so that this looks like the signing to do that. Phil, you'd probably know better than I do. I wonder how much of that goal contribution can translate from that level that he was playing at to USL Championship.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really happy to see that I mean, it's definitely an intentional replacement for Mr. Velasquez. It's my understanding that Mars is from Indiana, so that I find that kind of interesting because that El Paso is so different from the Midwest.
Right.
So I hope that he can settle in quickly and start contributing for us. But
yeah. He's played at this level for quite a while now, or had played at this level for quite a while, and through no fault of his own, was relegated when the NASL ceased to be
forcibly relegated.
Not by any lack of performance, because Miami was one of the top teams in the league. So across his time in NASL, he had somewhere in the region of like 18 goals, and then a further 18 assists. So he's creative, but and is able to set up goals, but he also scores them, which is obviously what we kind of cried out for in the 10 when we signed Velasquez last year. So it seems like we're entering the season with the type of player who can provide that, from the get-go.
Yeah, it's exciting. Looking at some video of him, looked very promising and like an immediate, kind of plug and play there for us, with losing Velasquez. Just kind of a funny coincidence that we essentially just made a swap. But yeah, hopefully he can make an impact, very quickly. I don't know how long he's been here, training with the team, but hopefully he has had some time to get acclimated and can get over that breaking in period that we had last year, with Jerome and with Velasquez too, and come out strong at the beginning of the season.
He was the player TBA who scored against Texas United and scored in this one as well. So good that he's getting goals under his belt, even though it is just preseason. And it is worth noting that in the second half, San Antonio FC, as you said, Mikka, they made a change. Like, they basically took all their actual USL players off at halftime. They had a couple of people still on. Cardoni stayed in goal, but the onslaught of the 6 goals comes after a few key players leave the field for San Antonio, and at that point, Locomotive's legs mattered much less, because their skill was ultimately enough to carry them above their trialist and academy kind of opponents. But the one thing I was talking about earlier, I mean, we got to look at multiple midfield shapes in this one, and I think that's been one of the things that we've talked about, kind of whether it's in the group chat or on Twitter or wherever. We've been talking about kind of who fits where, and one of the really interesting things was seeing all of the different combinations of Richie, Nick Ross, Chapa, Distel, Fabrice, all being able to like fill these different roles across midfield. And I mean, we talked about the versatility, but how powerful is it to be able to field that amount of, or to have that amount of flexibility in midfield when opponents are trying to game plan, but you have like 6 different options for 3 midfield spots?
Yeah, I think I may have said last time on the pod that it could be potentially problematic just because we're wondering what players might get less minutes than they would like. But at the same time, like you said, it gives us more options. It gives us more opportunities to use different tactics. I mean, I know last season, Mark used the diamond at times, or just a 4-2-3-1. And so it'll be interesting to see how he kind of incorporates everyone. Because I mean, we have Distel, Richie, Fabrice can play in midfield. Yuma, Chapa, I'm sure. I mean, Dylan Mahrez.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the setup.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of want to see what we can do with like a 4-3-3 and not have like the typical 10, but give one or two of those players license to kind of like roam in the half space.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Did they do 4-3-3 at all?
So they played. It was interesting because watching it, it looked like a 4-3-3. But Mark, speaking about it, called it a diamond. And so the first lineup that came out, Richie was playing in the 6, no issues there. Distel was playing in one of the 2 kind of box-to-box central midfield roles alongside Chapa. And then Saeed Robinson was actually playing as the 10. But in practice, it almost felt closer to like a Liverpool 4-3-3, where it's not a 10 so much as it's just that forward who drops into midfield, a la Roberto Firmino. So it didn't feel, because he had Lomas and Omar were playing up top. So Omar was obviously moving like out into the wide areas. So it's not really a 4-4-2 because he's not playing like center forward. He's playing as like a wide attacker.
Right.
So it felt like a 4-3-3 with Lomas kind of like making runs in off of the left and then like popping in at center forward. But Saeed was playing like in the hole behind him. But Omar was out on the right. And so it's I think in a way you can call it a diamond, but it's like it's a very flexible and kind of like
fluid in the
diamond.
transition and attack.
Because it with the ball, it doesn't really look like 2 up top or whatever. It really kind of looks like Saeed playing just behind Lomas with Omar like out in the wide areas, like providing that. So it's a very interesting kind of setup because I do think it changes so much based on who's in there. Because one substitution, you take Chapa off and put in Nick, and Nick is gets a little more advanced, a little more. So it's the same formation in the strictest sense, but becomes more. It just has this like fluidity about it.
Yeah, the dynamic of it all kind of like the goal of it all changes.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a very that was always interesting to see, and it was definitely interesting to see how different players operate in those roles. I think we're all excited about the prospect of a player like Distel, playing in midfield, and he just showed so much of why he was brought in. He definitely looked tired, and you could tell that he probably played a big part in the game against Cincinnati. But there's so much of what he does and being able to receive the ball in midfield, turn, and just make progress downfield past people. Very tough to get the ball off. And so between him and then I'll talk about our local boys here a little later because I was really impressed by how Memo and Chapa looked in the friendly as well. But before we get there, I had the pleasure of viewing a goal that I think Mikka has been, kind of expecting from Alexi since he joined. And Alexi Bassetti, credit to Duke Keith for capturing the moment on video, and he was, right behind the goal when that one flew in. But Alexi Bassetti scores an absolute screamer as well in the second half. Just a nice little punctuation mark on the performance.
Yeah, like I said, I think that we didn't get to see fully fit Alexi Bassetti. He went home to France, got married, I believe.
Yeah.
Got to, recharge at home and come back, and he looks like a player.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see what he can do, and I mean, I don't know. Do we think he's the number 9 on opening night?
I don't know.
Or do we think he pairs with Marios? Or
it was he came in second half, or the second half of the first half. The second 15 of the first half, the beginning of the second half. I don't know. Anyways, he came in, and he similar to how we'd kind of expect. He really likes to be on the edge of the box. Like, that's kind of the space in which he's dangerous. Like, he's either creating and passing, or he's shooting, and in this case scoring from the edge of the area, the curler in off the post. But I don't know, like, I think he can play up top. He certainly has a quality, but I think you almost see the most out of him when he's able to operate kind of further from the goal, because it opens up so many options for him, like, technically.
Well, I think that just goes back to the versatility we were talking about, and how we may see him. It just depends on what we need for that particular match. I think
Right.
Mark has shown that he's, willing to adapt, on a match-by-match basis, and so it may be almost kind of futile thinking about, who's going to play where this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's always a pleasure to be able to see a goal like that in person. There's just something visceral about it, where everybody reacted, like, even though it is a friendly, and it's, when you see something like that, the curler, and just the way the technique for a player like that, it's always nice to see. And Alexi, obviously, it's nice to see him find the back of the net as well. And I mean, as you said, seeing him get a full preseason with the team, and I think Mark touched on it a little bit as well with speaking to him after the game, just him being fit for a season and having that. I mean, he can add really, like, so much in attack, just because technically he's probably one of the best players on the team in terms of his technical ability.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that's something that we did get to see a little bit of towards the end of last season, is how he manipulates the ball. I mean, the curve that he can get on the ball, whether it be a cross or an attempt on goal, is really impressive, and it'll just be that much better when they start going in competitive fixtures.
So, two players that featured heavily in the match, that we obviously we saw last year, but they pretty new to this level, and being the local guys, I think they had a little bit of a different expectation on them. But Memo Diaz and Chapa get in this game and get quite a lot of minutes. Memo played at both left back and right back, where we saw him play at right back last season, deputizing for Brahim, and played extremely well in that game in Reno, I believe, towards the end of last season. And then Chapa got, I think, about 75 minutes of this one. And one of the things that struck me about both players, well, first, Memo is rocking, I don't know if you guys have seen the pictures.
That hair.
He's got the hair grown out, and he's got the headband. So he's got, like, a whole different vibe from, because he was very clean cut last year. So now, I mean, do you think this is a calculated move on on what is it, MD23? Is that like his? He's got his
brand.
His brand. Is this a calculated move?
I don't know. He's ready for his come up, I guess.
Players with long hair, I always inherently think that they're like better.
Yeah.
Even though that might not be true.
It's from your years watching Italian and Spanish football.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it. It's great. I mean, to be fair, it might just mean that he is feeling a little bit more confident in his second year here and ready to make a difference. So grow your hair out all you want, Memo.
And then, I mean, between Memo and Chapa, it's interesting because I think at times, because they're the local guys, they get seen by certain segments of, not just the people who watch Locomotive, but by probably certain segments of like USL at large. It's kind of seen as like, oh, like it's cool that there are local guys on the team or whatever, but
like token
right, like
local players,
right, like filling out, just making up the numbers or whatever. But in both these guys' cases, one, we've seen like their development from the beginning of last season to the end of last season. We already saw quite a bit. Now watching this game, I think confidence-wise, both of them are kind of out to prove that they belong at this level, and they're not just here to make up the numbers. They're not just here to sit at the end of the bench. Like, these guys are trying to make an impact, and I mean, in preseason, like they're impressing. So I mean, between these guys, does it just kind of emphasize, I guess, the fact that Mark doesn't really allow for the like hangers on or the like, if you're not going to contribute, you're not going to be in the team, let alone just like not going to play. Like, and these guys' mentality allows them to live up to that standard.
I think it may even be just that they're. I don't think it's as like cutthroat. I don't think in their mind it's as cutthroat as that. I think that it's more that they proved themselves enough last year, and that's why they're still here again this year.
Right.
Because I don't imagine they were on 2-year contracts.
No, neither of them were actually.
So I feel like they're here again. They feel they belong, and I think maybe they're loosening up now.
Right.
I think that they had this in them all along, and so now it's a matter of them just. Now they're comfortable. They know they belong here. They've kind of gotten rid of those nerves, and so now it's just go out and get theirs every game.
Yeah, and I can say watching in this game, like Chapa especially, but Memo as well. Like Chapa looks almost like a different player, and I'm not just speaking like second half when he was just bullying like the kids out there. In the first half, like he really looks, because there were times I think last season where he would come on, or he would especially early last season, where it was like you could kind of tell that the occasion was like big for him, and he was still kind of coming to grips with the fact that he was playing professional football. Like it was still kind of new. Now it doesn't really look that way. Like Chapa looked completely at home, and I mean, how much? I guess does that just speak about him, the player, or the person, or I mean, what does that come down to? Like being able to handle this kind of rise from obscurity to now he's trying to hang on a professional roster.
Yeah, I would never want to say that it has nothing to do with him and who he is as a person, but I do want to give credit to Mark and the coaching staff for nurturing that talent, that diamond in the rough, if you will, because like you said, I don't think Mark or anyone at Locomotive would tolerate just having local guys on the team for the sake of it.
Right.
I think that they saw in both of these players that there's more to them, and especially with Chapa, I always felt that Chapa, while he did a lot of the hard graft, I always felt like he could probably carry the ball if he wanted to, and you just spoke right now about him looking like a different player, and did he do some of that where he was kind of like driving forward with the ball from deep? Because that's really what I'd like to see from him. I think that might be something too that is missing sometimes. We can look a little pedestrian in midfield sometimes, and so I always thought he had the legs for that, and maybe it was just about having the coaching staff kind of like nurture his talent and kind of tweak things along the way. So yeah, definitely his success up to this point has a lot to do with him, of course, and his kind of blue collar background. But I'm sure the coaching staff have put in a lot of work with him.
His blue collar background? Would you like to elaborate on?
I don't know if anyone knows this, but he used to work construction.
Oh my god.
Wow, you heard
We're
it
like
here.
making light of it. It's impressive. It's just it's always fucking sick.
Breaking news.
You heard it here first, folks.
The scoop.
Yeah. So Chapa though, little bit of out of left field story, as I saw him play last Friday or whatever, and then just this week we get this tweet from the club, and it was preceded by a press release like via email by about a minute, but the tweet revealing that Chapa spent this past week on trial at LAFC in MLS, and I mean any kind of scar tissue there with the word trial.
Well, I was going to say, first I have to clarify, was it trial or training? It's important.
The club
Triggered.
I will say the club called it a trial. So
I mean, we heard something like this earlier. Like, I almost feel maybe it wasn't LAFC, but we heard that someone was interested in him at some point earlier in the off season.
Yeah.
Never would have thought that it would be LAFC.
Right.
But hearing that, I mean, I don't know how long that they had been talking to him about that, but that also might contribute to how he's changed, and getting that kind of attention just must add loads of confidence. And I don't know exactly how much time he spent over there, but there's a lot you can pick up from being around that kind of wisdom and that kind of talent.
I mean, Chapa getting an opportunity like that, obviously, like, very cool for the player. But how much too is it, like, how would we view Chapa moving on to like an MLS side or whatever, like within the next couple of seasons? Like, maybe he impresses over the next couple of years. Like, how big of a move like that, or how big is a move like that for a guy from not only having come from not playing, he didn't come playing at a big academy or up through the ranks like that. He it's an open tryout, all that stuff. But also just for the city itself, in terms of like the talent, the amount of talent that goes unrecognized here in town. Like, how much does it open doors for the rest of the kids that play here?
I mean, it would be incredible. I mean, we have another player on our roster, Omar Salgado, who was the first overall pick. So that's really impressive. If Chapa could, I think if Chapa were to get to that level, his pathway would be perhaps more relatable to some of these kids that are, maybe a little bit less privileged, or, they're playing their soccer perhaps just with their schools if they can't afford to, play on these clubs that sometimes are very expensive to be a part of. So it would be really cool to have that kind of role model if he were to, he's already made it to this level, which is very impressive. But I mean, to be getting trials with MLS clubs and potentially moving in the future would be really great. I did see on this topic, that there was a player from Eastlake High School who just signed with Real Monarchs. I don't know if it was like an academy contract or what have you, but it's cool. It's cool to see that our area is kind of getting more recognized for its talent. So
I think it's great. Aside from what it does for Chapa and all the kinds of the kids who maybe look up to him and him as a role model, I think it's also great for the club. I think that's kind of almost like one of their mission statements almost, is to be that pathway. And I think that, I don't know where they are in their academy process and how much of a part of the business they want to make that, but I think that it is definitely an inspiration for them too. And to be able to, if that works out, then if this club and this league is here, in 15 years, maybe we have 3 or 4 players who have the same or similar story So that's why I think it's important, is that, you know, how if it goes well for him, how much easier it is to sell that as the club.
And on this note, Kevin Quintana asked our Twitter, how much of Chapa will we see this year compared to his growth last season? Thoughts from each member on how much impact he will have. So impact, we'll just quickly go around the horn to close the Chapa conversation. How much, what do you see Chapa's impact being versus last year in terms of maybe I guess like involved in more or less games, and I guess more or less goals? I guess that's kind of how to quantify this. So I mean,
I think if you just go by odds, you know, I think he had 1 goal last season.
Chalked off for own goal, unfortunately.
We're gonna call it his goal still. But I think he'll be in more games this year, and so I think it stands to reason that he will score more than 1 goal. And I just think that he'll go from more of like a utility player to kind of more of like a featured player.
Sure.
Not just there because we don't have any other options, but he's there because his particular skill set is needed against whatever opponent we might be facing that week.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I mean, like I said, I want to see Chapa carry the ball more. I think that he does have that ability, and I would hope that it's improved over this preseason. I don't know. I mean, it's again, we have so much depth, which is a good problem to have, but if he can make himself stand out and become a starter, that would be awesome to have an El Paso boy kind of in the starting 11.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think what I'm really going to pay attention to with Chapa this year, and I'll probably be getting on Smarter Scout for, is kind of the advanced metrics.
Yeah.
I think that's where you will really see his value and his contribution to the team. I'm not totally convinced in that goal contribution is where we'll see it, but ball progression, tackles and interceptions per 90, things like that, I think it's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah. Maybe Chapa becomes the kind of the unsung hero in terms of, because we talk about hard work and all this stuff, but in terms of ball retention and then also being a part of moves that lead to goals, I guess.
Sure.
Not necessarily being the assist, but being that couple of passes before that kind of sets everything up. Mm-hmm. But I think it is still, just to temper this ever so slightly, I guess I don't want to be the guy that rains on the parade or anything. But I do think this is going to be from last season, we got into some situations in midfield where Chapa was almost forced into playing in the middle part of the season just due to injuries to Nick, and Richie was out for a little while as well. So we were kind of playing with, we're kind of playing a threadbare kind of midfield because we had these injuries. Yuma was out for a time. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how Chapa copes with the fact that he is competing with so many people for these spots. Because there's essentially, 3 roles that he can play in the midfield. He's not really going to play DM because that, it's going to be Richie or Yuma or probably, Fabrice maybe at this point. He can also play there. So, Chapa is really vying for one of those 2 kind of number 8 roles in midfield, and it'll be interesting to see him go up against the likes of Nick Ross, who we know Mark rates extremely highly, Distel, who Mark has specifically brought in to essentially play this role. So if Chapa can assert himself and be a legitimate choice at those, it means that he's grown not just as a player, but also in relative to the growth of these other great players that are also rated highly by our manager. So it will be. I think this will be such an important year for Chapa's development, in that he will have to work extremely hard to get in the team. But if he's getting in the team, it means that he's made like absolute leaps and bounds and is like training his absolute ass off, which we know he will do either way. So not, just because he's not starting doesn't mean he's not working, but it is going to be extremely competitive in that midfield. But he offers just an incredible option now. And I think, as you said, with rotation, he will feature heavily because there are those long months where we're playing like 3 times a week and things get extremely busy. So Chapo will definitely get his shot this year, and I really do hope that he's able to take it. And he looks like more than capable of it when he gets the shot as well. So moving into something a little away from, I guess, the analysis side and into some of the lighter-hearted stuff that's been going on around USL this offseason, it's worth pointing out we have these Twitter connections brewing between English Championship and USL Championship teams, and it all kind of started with Birmingham Legion playing Memphis, or I guess getting into a Twitter war with Memphis.
Yes.
And Birmingham City fans from England jumping in defense of their sister club, or sisters.
Courtesy of the Peaky fucking Blinders.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this strange world that we live in, the blue side of Birmingham, our manager's arch nemesis, I guess,
right,
came in on the side of the Legion, one of the East's expansion teams from last year. So it sparked this kind of discussion and some banter back and forth. I saw Wigan tweeting about pies. There was all kinds of stuff going on, but the question that kind of came out of it was, which teams are paired and how should they link up. So the question that started going around is who would Locomotive's I guess paired team be. And this is kind of a weird, there's not a lot of train based teams in England. There's not many railway references, so we couldn't, and there's no El Paso, UK, obviously. So it was kind of that made it a little more difficult than Birmingham had it. But I don't know. Do you guys first? I guess I'll ask, like, do you think there's any like value in these like weird kind of things that happen on the internet, or like, is it just kind of stupid? Or
I mean, if nothing else, it just gets you a little bit of exposure. I mean, I'll say firsthand, for someone who wasn't watching a lot of international football, you kind of latch on maybe to the first thing that catches your eye, and so when something like this happens, Birmingham might now have a fan who has a podcast who is having the same conversation, and they're like, oh yeah, like Birmingham Legion, I know about them. And so just kind of getting that exposure is, it's always nice to grow your brand a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there a team that Locomotive can pair up with?
Like you said, there's no obvious one. I mean, I started like digging into this because I was just kind of jealous that like they were like communicating on Twitter with an English club. I mean, I think Stoke City was actually, they merged with another club that was formed by railway workers.
Right.
So that's like the one like tenuous link I could find, but I hate Stoke City. So it's like
the Potters.
Yeah, the Potters.
And they wear red too.
And they wear red, so it doesn't work. Yeah,
it's kind of tough.
But I liked your shout.
Yeah. Well, and mine was very basic at first, because I was scrolling the table and I'm like, what teams do I not hate? There's not really any teams in the championship that I like actually despise at this point, but
I despise Stoke.
I guess my hatred for them has like worn over the couple of years they've been out of the Premier League, but yeah, at first I was thinking like, okay, well they should probably like at least, we can't get the train connection, so like maybe we can get a connection with a team that wears blue. And so that was where I started digging into Blackburn Rovers, and Blackburn Rovers, like, very historic club. One of the most, I would say, recognizable badges as well.
The one with the roses?
Yeah, with the rose in it. And so, kind of a working class club, long history. But the working class thing, like, really kind of resonates, between El Paso, I think, and them. And then they wear white and blue, primarily. They also have like a dark blue, light blue thing going on in a lot of their alternate kits, which obviously that's us too. And then their motto on their badge is arte et labore, skill and labor. And to me, that like very much fit the ethos that Mark kind of tries to instill in Locomotive. So that was my shout. They have not responded, unfortunately. I was hoping to have some kind of report by now of how I've been bantering back and forth with Blackburn Rovers, but no, they're big time in me for the time being. So we'll see if we can get any traction on that front. But I had a shout on Twitter that was like, well, why settle for the championship? Why not go for Villa? Because that is Mark Lowry's hometown team and the team that he supports to this day. So, I mean, I guess maybe we should just, if Rovers are going to blow us off, like maybe we just go for the villains.
Damn, Premier League, okay. I mean, I don't mind it.
Like, Mark's got some clout. If he puts out a tweet for us, then might get some attention.
Didn't Mark work for Wolves at one point? I thought he was like a coach in their system.
Yeah.
Maybe I totally made that up, but I don't know.
Well, we had a little bit of a retrospective, I guess, up here on Mark Lowry. Jeff Reuter in The Athletic putting out a big piece on the boss. First off, I mean, even avoiding his, or not avoiding, but, talking about his time in the UK and kind of his frustrations with the game in the lower leagues of the UK. Just from the very idea of having a manager who is getting these kind of profiles written about him, I mean, it seems like we're very lucky to have I mean, we talked about it when we interviewed him at the end of last season, but to have a manager like this who's very upfront, but also, he has this kind of profile building around him. He has this kind of, his style and everything has attracted people to him. How kind of crazy is it that out of the teams in USL, like, we have probably one of the higher profile managers?
I mean, I think it's awesome, and I think in a lot of ways we continue to be spoiled here. I think what the most interesting part about it is it doesn't feel that way. Like, you don't feel like there's a lot of buzz around him. Maybe different from like Marcina coming in, or I don't know. I have yet to read a single thing about Landon Donovan, managing in San Diego, so it doesn't. It's just kind of interesting the way, and I think he fits in so well here in that he has that profile, like you said, but we're El Paso, we don't have, lights and electricity, just that kind of buzzing around us all the time.
Right.
And so I think, and I assume he prefers it that way too, which I think makes him just an awesome fit. And I think that if the time comes when we ever do have a manager, I think that we're probably going to be disappointed, just because it's awesome just to listen to him talk. How much he loves the game itself,
right.
And he just wants to continue, like it says in the article, to kind of just build this philosophy and kind of revolutionize the way soccer is coached. And if that, if he's able to do that and people are talking about him in, 50 years, and we can say that we were kind of there when it started, and I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, it's a really good article. I would really encourage anyone who is subscribed to The Athletic to give it a read.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I read the article. I thought it was really great. I thought the praise for him is very well deserved because Mark is doing something that can be a little daunting if you're a coach, and especially in your first year with a brand new club and you want results quickly. He never really deviated from the way that he wanted to play. Mm-hmm. And coaches at the highest level deviate from their plans. I mean, cough, cough, Unai Emery. So, when they need an uptick in results. And so that was one focus of the article that I thought was really fascinating. The other thing, too, that I think is really interesting, and this is more about, I guess, English coaches in general, is that I feel like the United States has kind of become kind of like a... I don't know what the term would be, like just a really interesting opportunity for some of these younger English coaches, because I was actually listening to a podcast on this that was kind of discussing how there's kind of this like mistrust or like apprehension with like English coaches, even in the Premier League especially. Right. I mean, a lot of the top jobs are taken up by managers from the continent. Right. And so here in the United States, these coaches can come and really just, go with their tactics and structure a team the way they want to without so much of that scrutiny that they might face back at home. And so Mark has certainly done that and blazed his own path here in the United States. And there's other coaches like him as well. For example, like Anthony Pulis, who I believe he's now with Inter Miami as like an assistant coach, but he's managed at this level as well. And so, it's really interesting to see kind of like some of the younger English talent coming here to make names for themselves. And it's really awesome that we have Mark. He's only 34 years old. I mean, goodness. Yeah. He could really build something here. I hope he's with us for forever.
Yeah. And that is, I guess it's interesting to, talking about young English coaches, because so many English coaches kind of get this, I would say, stigma around them based on the style of play that is played in the lower divisions of England. Right. In some cases, I think that a lot of that is changing now with just the way that certain coaches in world football have really just kind of revolutionized how the game is played, and you're not relying on some of these things like big target men or anything like that.
4-4-2.
Yeah. Although I will, I did laugh quite heartily when Carlo Ancelotti with Everton went to Liverpool and played 4-4-2, which is just like was one of the strangest, like just one of those surreal moments where you're like, are you Sam Allardyce? Like, what's happening here? But no, like his Lowry coming to the States and then having this style that is so heavily influenced by like the top managers in the game, and like, it's played by the best players, the best teams. When you think about like this possession-based style, you think about, Pep's Barcelona teams and all this stuff that just like absolutely pass teams to death. And so to have that philosophy and to want to play that style is one thing. And it makes me think about Brendan Rodgers, who he came into Liverpool and he said, I'm going to play this style. but his best results he got with like a counterattacking style and not playing that way. So for Mark to, it's one thing to say that you're going to execute this style and that you're going to, I'm going to have these principles, but when you do waver, especially in an inaugural season where you are expecting, people are expecting things and they want results. They don't want to be like, I mean, no offense to the Memphis fans out there, but no one wants to be that Hartford or Memphis or whatever, where they are an expansion team and do absolutely nothing for an entire season. So it would have been easy for Mark to be like those first couple of months where it was slow and he wasn't really getting like tangible results because it was, we just weren't scoring goals, like all this stuff. It would have been easy for him to just toss his, philosophy like in the trash and be like, all right, let me like get something going and like start hoofing it up to Omar and maybe he'll, score a couple of goals and we'll get this thing back on track. And he didn't, and he really stuck to like, we're going to play the way that we play. And I think now, and I hope that the continuation into this season is that we have this kind of core group of players who have now bought into that system. So when you are only blooding in like, 4 or 5 new players, it's easy to bring them up to speed and be like, this is how El Paso Locomotive plays. Like, this is how Mark Lowry like plays football.
Right.
And so it's just been it's been great that he stuck with it, and the idea that he's playing a style that just isn't really played in American soccer, and especially in the lower leagues, is just it's amazing to have that happening here in El Paso and have kind of this guy who is wanting to change the way that people think about how the game can be played at this level. And hopefully we're looking at this season it will be a more consistently successful style as well. But he does look set for great things, and he is one of those guys, as you said, Christian. He's just like loves the game and loves to talk about it. Like, we'll just after pressers or whatever, like we'll just sit around like shooting the shit for like an hour talking about everything around the league and the game. And so he's one of those guys where you can tell in the way that he talks about it how passionate he is and how he wants to be successful, but he's willing to, or he's not willing to compromise how he goes about it. And so now it seems like he's kind of building the roster in that way now to support playing that way and being successful at the same time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so we had a little bit of discussion too, and I just want to throw in like a little thing about this today because it happened on Twitter. But like there was a little discussion today just around the stadium, and New Mexico is talking about getting public funds for a stadium and all that, and so with Louisville opening their new stadium, I just preach today the patience, and I know that's easier said than done, but I've seen I've seen the Chicago Fire, who are now moving back to Soldier Field where they started in 1997. They built their own stadium in a bad location because they rushed to get it done. They couldn't get a city limits stadium done. It got put out in the suburbs, and it was a nightmare to get to. No public transportation, no like infrastructure around it, nothing to do around it. And, after now 13 years of playing out there, they're back at square one, back in an NFL stadium. So all I will say to those Locomotive fans who are obviously pining for a home of our own, I will say, getting it right is better than getting it now. So I will just say, preach some caution in a good site is much better than a site right now. And getting all of that stuff done. Mika, as you pointed out on Twitter today, getting a lot of this stuff done is not easy.
No, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and I mean, look at what New Mexico United is having to do. They're lobbying the state government for this stuff. I mean, this is a process.
Yeah.
I've had it put to me that, well, they're multimillionaires, they can make this happen. No multimillionaire is putting their own money into this.
Right.
Let's just put that out there right now.
Multimillionaires.
Exactly. So, yeah. I mean, of course they're going to spend a little bit of money, but they're not financing this thing. I mean, it's going to be fully leveraged.
A lot of stuff is going to come from public funds, unfortunately, which is how it's how it works. But
so I have to agree with you, Phil. I think that good things come to those who wait. And I mean, to be fair, okay, whatever, we play in a baseball stadium, and it's really like low hanging fruit as far as like banter is concerned.
Right.
But it's not that bad for right now. I mean, it really isn't. The stadium's nice. It's not like it's not like Cohen Stadium, where it's that would suck.
Yeah.
It's not a baseball stadium. It's like one of the top 2 nicest minor league stadiums in the country.
Yeah, and it's been recognized as such. So
it's not just the first place where they could get enough grass to play on and enough seats.
Yeah, and it's downtown. It's a good location. I mean,
Like if we could change it, if we could just turn it into a soccer stadium, that would just be awesome.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm getting to a point where I'm going to want some kind of, because obviously the nets are one thing that people talk about, the foul ball nets and everything. And I'm getting to a point where I'm going to want some kind of barrier there so that the goal celebrations of hanging off of it can continue.
Those are definitely fun.
I know that Eighth Notch doesn't like being separated from the players and all of that, but I do enjoy I think Edson was the first to do it, but Jerome Kiesewetter obviously took a liking to it, and Yuma as well, getting into the net and hanging off of it. So, I mean, it's kind of reminiscent of stadiums in like Italy and Germany that have the fences between the fans and the field, and a lot of celebrations have taken place on hanging off of those. So
it could, and with that being said, it could be worse. We could have a running track between us and the pitch.
And that's how it is in Juarez. So.
Yeah, that's...
It's like a track and a moat. I think it's... I don't know if it's for safety reasons.
And that's trash. I wouldn't want that.
And that is, I think, one of the things that gets lost in as you said, the baseball stadium, because it is the low-hanging fruit. It's... The thing that's lost is that, I mean, most of the sight lines for soccer, with the exception of the one corner in the outfield, are good. There's not really...
There's not a bad seat there.
Yeah, aside from sitting at the top of the second deck in that left field corner, that's the one bad section, and that's where we stick away fans.
I mean, and I'll say this too, in that, as long as it takes, I'm honestly fine with it. I think that the ownership group has done enough with the baseball team to show that they know what they're doing. They are smart business people.
Yeah.
And they're not, the type of ownership group that is making some of these decisions that is leading to the downfall of some of these other clubs in championship.
Right.
So I think that the public really just needs to kind of trust that those people are smarter than us, and know that the pace it's getting done at is the best pace to do it at.
Yeah, and that work. I think the biggest thing to remember is that work is being done on it. Just because it's not being talked about in the news and stuff does not mean that the groundwork is not being laid. And mentioning the FC Juarez Stadium and Bravos as well. Going to Memo Cantu's unveiling at Southwest University Park, one of the things he explicitly mentioned was facilities, and I think their stadium is also a priority for Mountain Star.
I mean, I'm sure that's going to bring them a lot more revenue.
So a lot of things to take into consideration, but the best thing to take into consideration is that we are a mere month away from the 22 days
that's the first
to
game.
till till the opener on that Friday night against Orange County away, and then just 31 days, I believe, from the home opener,
30.
or 30 days now from the home opener. So we are rapidly approaching real Locomotive season 2. It is happening, so we're obviously getting very excited for that. We have a few preseason games left, one against New Mexico United on Saturday, which I know a few folks from 8th Notch and then our very own Mikka Burrell will be in attendance for that one.
Yes, I will be there. I will do my best to live tweet and just enjoy and see what the preseason version of the Rio Grande Derby.
Yeah, it was that game was last year was very chippy as well in preseason. I gained an affinity for Derek Gebhard in that particular game for some very colorful language that he used. But it is, we're in the thick of preseason, and the squad is coming together. We're looking at another, hopefully, a strong start to the season this time around, and we'll be looking to get out of the gates. We'll have all of that covered for you between the friendlies, and obviously we'll be restarting our alternate commentary for our away games, so we'll have those going, and then obviously covering all of basically every match this season, and we'll be back week after week to bring that back to you. So I want to give, before we end, just want to give a shout out to all our Patreon subscribers, and you guys are absolutely just absolute legends. Thank you guys for supporting the podcast and giving us the ability to do some more stuff. We have merch in the works, and it will be on the way very shortly. So we've got some pretty cool stuff on the way for you guys who have been clamoring for it for the better part of a year. So we're finally about to deliver on that promise, but we will have merch in the near future. Thanks to our sponsor, Roughneck Scarves, official scarf supplier to MLS, USL, and US Soccer. Get custom scarves for your group or team at roughneckscarves.com. Are you tired of the same old uniforms and cookie cutter templates from Nike and Adidas? Looking for a unique, completely custom kit for your youth club, Sunday league squad, adult, or even pro team? Icarus FC can help you create the kit of your dreams at an affordable price. Let them help you design your new custom kit today at IcarusFC.com. If you guys enjoyed this episode, then and you aren't already, then you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and other podcast platforms. Basically any popular podcast platform you can find us. And then you can find us at Seriously Loco on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we'll have all of the Seriously Loco content all of the Locomotive content that you could possibly want. And until next time, guys, stay loco.